Welcome to another episode of Dan's Frequently Asked Questions. In this episode, we are going to be discussing craniotomy and diving. Keep watching. We got a question from a diver who had received brain surgery that required what we call burr holes, which essentially is a hole in the skull. And the surgery was performed accordingly, and they now want to know whether they can continue diving. Their main concern is whether the pressure will have an effect on those areas where the holes were drilled. And I'm going to answer the question on two levels. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the whole issue of pressure when it comes to the body. Secondly, I'm going to deal with the issue of brain surgery and the potential risks that has with diving. So let's start with the burr holes themselves and, in fact, pressure's effect on the body. The only time pressure affects the body is when there is a gas space in relation to the body's predominantly fluid context or content. When that exists, like with a face mask, or if inside the body there is an air space, then there is a tendency of the ambient pressure of the water to push the body into that air space. But if there isn't an air space, then that doesn't happen. For instance, your blood pressure, usually using a traditional textbook value, is 120 millimeters mercury, and remember atmospheric pressure is 760, so 120 on 80, which means when your heart contracts, it's 120. When it relaxes, there is still 80 millimeters of pressure above ambient pressure in your blood vessels, so they don't collapse. If you go diving, and we disregard the effect of exercise and immersion and so on for the moment, your blood pressure is still going to be 120 on 80 on top of whatever the ambient pressure is. Why? Because the heart is full of blood. Blood consists of fluid. It's not a compressible space. And for that reason, you are not going to get a collapse of the heart or a net problem in relation to the heart. So that's the first thing to consider. Okay, so the important thing now, apart from the pressure component, is the issue of the brain surgery. If you have surgery on the brain, which involves opening up the brain, which is what the burr holes are for, they essentially are just access points, and then a special wire saw is usually used to remove a part of the cranium dome. And then when surgery is performed, sometimes to remove a tumor, sometimes to drain a bleed, such as I believe is the case in this particular instance, there is an injury, even if it's small, to the surface of the brain. And for a period that varies from 6 months to 2 years, and some even say 5 years, there may be a significant risk of getting post-surgical epilepsy. And a seizure underwater is usually fatal. It is very rare for people to survive an underwater seizure event. So unfortunately, even though the burr holes aren't a primary concern, the surgery is. And I would like to ask you to please consult not only your neurosurgeon, but a diving physician, and also look up the different policies in returning to diving after brain surgery as a guide to give you that information. And Dan has excellent articles about returning to diving after brain surgery. I'm sorry I can't give you better news at this stage, but that is the important information that you need to take with you and for all of you to remember. Until next time, safe diving.